growing up and you think of the three big dreams, you come up with house, marriage, kids. Out of those ones, you think, if you would put them into prioritization of what's easy and what's harder, you probably put kids first, because, you know, they always give you warnings of be careful, you're gonna have a kid. And then you could put marriage second. Sometimes it's tough to find someone that'll stick with you for a while. And then house being kind of one of the tougher ones, especially in this market. But when you go through the early stages of growing up and being a teenager, and you hear about not to get people pregnant, be careful. It's like you're walking around with a loaded gun, but one that's going to get someone pregnant, right? So you do that, and then you're riding the bus and you're seeing pregnancy posters and help for pregnant teens, and it's scary, quite honestly. And yet they make it seem so easy, you know, that if you just think about it, you could get someone pregnant. So be careful with your thoughts. There's a comedian, Charlie Demers. He has a bit about trying to get pregnant that caught my attention. He basically says, oh my gosh. Oh yeah, trying to get pregnant is one of the, seems like an awesome thing, but isn't. And goes on to talk about the fact of, you know, have you ever thought of making an intimate moment scheduled and processed? You know, it's so structured, you know, it doesn't speak to what we think of lovemaking and getting someone pregnant and being conceived out of love. And so from that, the topic of IVF. So I've spoken on the VoiceStory stage before, and I invite you to go to the voicestory.ca and look up, there's other speaker alumni in the room actually, look up the stories that have been told before, but IVF is in vitro fertilization, and it is what is the stage of what I call baby making science. So the science of baby making, for those that don't know and haven't had a chance to watch the previous talks, I'll do kind of a Cole's note for you. Baby making, at the beginning, it starts off with action, right? You gotta have the action, but you need to have action for at least a year before you figure out whether you're having challenges making babies or not. And within that year, you start to do the evaluation. The assessment is not about, are you doing it right or wrong, right? The assessment is just timing, often, how much, so on and so forth, right? And then once you get closer to the end of the year, you start doing the testing. Now the testing is not to blame somebody. The testing is to figure out, is it a male issue or a female issue, so that they can kind of guide you accordingly. So after the lovemaking didn't work, then you move to what I call IUI. IUI is kind of the next step. That is what I refer to as the turkey basting, right? So my guys, they magically make it into a container. And then they take the container and they put it into a turkey baster of sorts, and they shoot it into my partner, and hopefully with the fact that the journey is shorter, so it's going to be successful. And if it's not, you might try that 2 to 4 times. And if you're unsuccessful in that, you move on to IVF. Now IVF is where you pump your partner full of hormones, and to continue on with the turkey theme, it's like the Thanksgiving of baby making, right? You're trying to like make the ovaries as big as possible, so it like produces as many eggs as you can possibly get, right? And then you'll have the best chance. So through that process, it's It's challenging. It's challenging because all those thoughts that we had about baby making being easy are totally gone. And you've shifted away from connection. You've shifted away from conceiving a baby out of love to truly incorporating science into this. People ask what it's like, and I often say it's like a boxing match, right? I actually love a quote from Mike Tyson. It says, "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face," you know. And with IVF, you have a very detailed plan. And to be honest, I fucking wish I'd get punched in the face, you know? It would feel better, actually, than that process of IVF. It's temporary, you know, you're gonna recover from that within a day. Even if I was punched by Mike Tyson, you know, even my face was broken, it'd still be less painful than the process of IVF. And so to continue with the boxing analogy, if you think of round one being financial stress, right? IVF is expensive, and so you got to figure out how you're going to do it. Do you have the money? Can you get the money? What sacrifices you're going to make? Do you have to get a loan? Do you have to use investments? So on and so forth. And that takes a lot because you might think that you're going to do one round. So to plan for that, you just say, okay, well, we just need X, and off we go. But you don't know if you're only going to need one round. You might need 2 or 3 or more. So round 2 is the physical stress. The physical stress both on your partner, in my case, and my partner, and yourself. You are injecting hormones, you're taking medication, in some cases you're taking good, get care of your health as far as the nutrition and that type of thing, but the stress of the situation, things start to go south. And so that dealing of the body, and quite honestly, you start to question, is there something wrong with me? Why is this not working? And I'll go back a bit because with infertility, there's a variety of diagnoses, right? But if you get the diagnosis of unexplained infertility, you're essentially being told that there's nothing really wrong with you, but they can't explain why you're not getting pregnant. So I'm going to bring that back into the mental stress, which is round 3, right? Now you're sitting there and you're constantly in this piece of trying to, I call them the power of micro moments. It's all these little things that are happening that are having an impact on your whole psyche. Small little things that are not adding up. And they're like just chipping away at you, chipping away at you. And the 4th round is the emotional round. Imagine the polarity of a baby announcement. A baby announcement is, go back to you're posting it on Facebook, you're posting it on Instagram. And for those that are in the IVF world and infertility world, it's such a mixed emotion because you, of course, want to be happy for them. You are happy for them. But it hurts. And that dichotomy is confusing and it's emotional because you're sitting there, you want to celebrate, and sometimes you can't. We've had, in a period of time that we've been trying, we've had 20 people close to us, family, friends, that have had babies. And that doesn't seem like a lot, except for when you've been crying for 2 days and you finally stop to open up your Facebook or Instagram and see a baby announcement. And you want to reach out and you want to congratulate them. and you can't type. You can't type it. So those are 4 rounds that I would refer to as for the IVF. And the 5th round is actually those 4 rounds over, combined, again, and again, and again. In our case, it was 6 of the 5 rounds. So that plays just havoc on your life, on your existence, on your soul, on pretty much everything. People ask me, how do you do it? You know, how do you cope with it? How do you stick with a goal that's so demanding of all of those 4 things? You know, financial, physical, mental, emotional. One of those rounds would be enough to knock somebody out. But we've gotten up and we've tried again, and we've gotten up and we've tried again. So when they ask how we do it, at one point, I didn't. I had to stop because I lost myself. I completely lost myself in my identity, in my friends, in my habits, because everything was focused on my partner. I put so much energy into my partner. The goal of having a baby was everything for us. You know, go back to those big dreams, right? When you're trying to knock those off your list and accomplish those things. And again, go back to the fact that it's just so easy, so it's not making sense. But I'm lucky because there was a point where I had an intervention. So I was going to a men's mastermind group, and it was like a scene, sorry, it wasn't a scene, but it felt like a scene from Temple of Doom, right? Where it's like all the gates are closing and everything's coming down or whatever else. And what would normally be a night of the 5 of us checking in on each other, holding each other accountable, became a night about Matt. A whole meeting dedicated to me. Checking in on me, seeing, am I okay? What do I have for resources? Where am I at? Do I meditate? Do I need a hug? I accepted them all. And so I'm fortunate to have had that group. And publicly, I'd like to thank Brad and Brian, Kayvon, Michael and Roger for having my back when I did not. But you find yourself and you continue. And that continuation for us led us to Prague. And we, again, when you go to the lengths of, some people don't understand it, right? People going back to the boxing analogy, some people, they're sitting there and they're just, it's like they're watching a boxing match and they're just like, please, stay down, you know, like they're doing the 10 count and it's like, you're out, just stay out. And you get up and they're like, oh God, I thought this was it. I thought they were gonna stop. And you don't. And so we went to Prague because you're willing to do anything. You're willing to do anything. And I'm using IVF, but in your lives, it could be a business. It can be a material possession. It could be the person that you're willing to do anything for. You're willing to do practically anything for. But at the end of the day, there's nothing practical about it. People think that you've like completely lost your mind. But they're not the ones with that dream, right? They're not the ones with that dream. When you listen to my story, I ask you, what are you capable of? And how do you know? How many shots are you willing to take? Will you persevere? Perseverance is described as contained effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failure, or opposition. When I read that, I'm like, wow. So to even think of persevering, you have to know that there's going to be failure involved. So that in itself says something about somebody who's willing to go onto that journey. One of the best, compliments I got was from a good friend of mine, Mark Bussy. And he said to me, I don't know how you do it. He goes, but I have to say, I'm impressed because you have all the right to be bitter and to be an asshole about what's going on for you, but you're not. And the reason for that for me is because of coming from a place of gratitude. You see, it wasn't all losses, even though I'm like half in tears and telling a bit of a sad story. But there was gains as well. I'll give you some examples. I gained a pound for almost every $1,200 that we spent. Let's just say I gained about 50 pounds. I practically have a nursing degree. I mean, not a real one, right? But the amount of education that we provided for doctors as we went through our process and started telling them about different things that are going on, it was amazing. I've given 160 shots to my partner. I don't know how many nurses give along the way, but 160 is a pretty good amount, especially when they're afraid of needles. So you take that, and then there's also the opportunity to see the world. We've gone from Vancouver to Victoria, and as I mentioned, to Prague. 38,000 kilometers we've traveled to have a baby. That's 5 trips across Canada. It's amazing. So when you look at those things and the experiences that you've had through the experience, those are the things that I look at and go, that's the other side of it, right? So our last round when we were in Prague, we, after our transfer, we went to the zoo. And I thought to myself, this is perfect. Like, this is a perfect definition of my life for the last, 6 years, right? Just, monkeying around and craziness all over the place, running, screaming. Well, they were kids, but, still. And then I look over, and I see my partner, Brenna. And I just think, God, here's the person who stood with me round after round and fought the fight with me. You gotta like that. And you know what they say? If you like it, you gotta put a ring on it, right? So we went back to the apartment and I proposed to her. And she said yes. So that was the start of the shift for all the negativity that had happened, taking things back into control, gaining ourselves back a little bit. Except 14 days later, we found out that the transfer wasn't successful. But we get to plan a wedding, right? That's fun. So we go back, we start to plan the wedding. We have a March wedding planned. But COVID. So now we don't get that. So we shift it and we make it to November. November happened. dream wedding, right? One off the big list of 3. So that was awesome, wonderful. And then actually the very following month, we co-purchased a home in Port Moody in this lovely Tri-Cities. So that's 2 out of 3. So that's what's possible, even though you might have lost yourself along the way, that you can gain yourself back. I wrote it down. It surprised me a little bit how much I was kind of preparing for this. But I wrote it down because I wanted to share, as a context expert at this point, my ABCs for what I learned on my journey and how to best make it through a difficult time where perseverance is going to be necessary. So A is for to anticipate and be agile. Think about what you or your partner may need in the future. Be prepared. Agile, be fluid. Learn to ride the waves, because there's going to be multiple. So if you can stay on top of them, you're not going to be drowning by the undercurrent. You know, if you think about agility and the difference between trying to break a stick versus trying to break a hose. You know, a stick is rigid, it would crack over your knee. A hose, not so much. And I know what you're thinking, and I assure you it's not the hose that was the issue for this IVF. B is for be brave. Actually, I'm wearing a bracelet that I got from a low entropy event, and I chose be brave, not knowing that I was going to use that today. So it's pretty amazing. And what I mean by that is to stretch your limits. You know, when I asked you the question of how many shots you would take, how do you know? You know, you don't know until you're willing to push it. I used to have a shirt, one of my favorite shirts was a Nike shirt growing up, and it said on the front, know your limits. On the back, it did not say, and stick within it, it said, and ignore them. And I love that. The way I put it is, if you go through life ordering 1 pepper kung pao chicken, how do you know that you can't handle 2 or 3? So next time you're out, think of me and go up a pepper. C is for check-in, and of course context. I talk about context quite a bit tonight because unless you have that, you don't know, right? You don't know what people are going through. Why did they stop contacting you? What's going on, right? And so checking in, what I mean by that is have someone, or actually multiple people is my suggestion. If you have one person, you got to make sure they have strong eyes, because you're going to walk up to them and they're going to be, oh God, here comes Matt with his baby science again. Okay, right? You got to have multiple people, because going back to some of the shame components and some of the things that have been shared, it's difficult. It's difficult for a person to take all of that on, right? It needs to be spread out for all parties, for all parties. And from a context perspective, remember to ask yourself, where are you? How is that impacting your behavior, your decisions, your communication? Because if you start to notice that those things are different, then you might not be where you thought you were. Thank you for being present. Thank you for supporting VoiceStory. And a reminder, if you fall down, get back up. I did.